Hey everyone, thank you for watching this episode of Tomorrow's Voters with former ambassador to Argentina, Noah Mamet. We go over his time as ambassador, as well as the current political landscape in America and the midterm elections. It's a good episode. Thank you all for watching. Ambassador Noah Mamet, welcome to Tomorrow's Voters.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to be on.
Maybe introduce yourself, just give us a little background of who you are, how you got into politics, and then up until President Obama nominated you as ambassador to Argentina.
Sure. Happy to do it. You guys are LA based. I grew up in Manhattan Beach, went to UCLA in your backyard, and was always interested in campaigns and politics. I remember probably illegally driving a moped before I could drive to go do phone banking for a presidential campaign. Obviously, it was before I could even legally vote. My parents were really interested in government, in politics, in campaigns, but weren't directly involved. They never worked in the business in any way. But that really led to me being super interested in it. And so when I was in college, I was a poli sci major, but more importantly, I started volunteering on campaigns like I had even before college, but started doing it in a more intensive way. Went to my first convention, first political convention in Atlanta a million years ago, 1988. Dukakis was the Democratic nominee, and it was a cool experience because I got to meet each of the candidates running for president, I think, except for one. And I met what then became my future boss because I interned while I was at UCLA for Congressman Mel Levine, who represented that area, that coastal area. So I was in DC 1 year. I went back the next year to do another internship for at CNN. They had a weekly show at the time called Inside Politics that became a daily show. And the cool thing was I got to focus on campaigns and elections for the next year. I came back and I ended up working for that congressman who then decided to run for Senate, Mel Levine. And we lost in the primary to Barbara Boxer, who then went on to become senator for over 20 years, 20 to 30 years. And full circle, she's become a friend because she lives in Palm Springs near me. And so I've just been involved for a really long time. After that, I worked in campaigns in California. I eventually bit the bullet in my view and went to DC. But the whole plan was just to go for a year and a half to work for House candidates. I didn't own a coat. I was from LA because I didn't plan on staying there. And we ended up in the Democrats in the House of Representatives. We got halfway there trying to get the majority. And I met my future boss, Congressman Gephardt, who was the House Democratic leader, who offered me a job as his national finance director, doing fundraising for him and for other House candidates. So I decided to stay because he was a great guy. His family was wonderful. So I ended up staying ultimately about 7 to 8 years. I really wanted to do one big presidential election with him, and we ended up running in 2004, and I was his national finance director. We lost in the primaries to John Kerry, but that enabled me to come back to California, come back to Los Angeles. So I did a number of races and based in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so you explained your sort of like working your way up the ladder gradually, getting promoted, having different jobs. But a little bit before that, was there a specific moment or a specific candidate that you saw that inspired you to pursue politics, study politics in college, and the things of that nature?
Yeah. So I was really fortunate. It's a great question because I ended up working for great people. Like I didn't have that many bosses. Like I mentioned, Congressman Mel Levine was a great guy, and then Richard Gephardt, Dick Gephardt was just a great guy. We ran for president, we lost, but I was really inspired by President Clinton. Although I didn't work directly for him at the time, I ended up working for him after he was president. He started a foundation. I helped that foundation. something called the Clinton Global Initiative, which was an annual event, and I worked for about 4 or 5 years to help raise money for that whole conference. It's basically a 2-3 day conference. And so and there were a lot of people, a lot of elected officials, senators, governors, but I think, many people focus on the presidency. And so at my age and my time, President Clinton for sure was a big influence. Before I went to Washington, I actually was based in Santa Barbara. I was the youngest county coordinator for the California Democratic Party. And that was in 92 when Clinton was running for president. And he won. And all these other races, we won. And then I went back to Washington to do the inauguration. So your question, I was really inspired by his inauguration in 92, but him as a candidate. But I did move back to California for a few years before going back to DC. So I was back and forth, but I was really fortunate. I really worked with good people. And then Ty, I didn't fully answer your question because I kind of gave you the background. And then the middle era, for about 10 years, I had my own company, still working in campaigns and politics, but as a volunteer at that point. I was helping raise money. I was helping plan events. And a lot of my friends were on campaigns directly. And then Obama ended up winning. But during the '08 campaign, initially I was working as in volunteering, but helping Hillary Clinton. We lost in the primary. See, you end up losing a lot more races than you win. That's a big takeaway as well. But I immediately started helping Obama, who I always liked, but I didn't really know him. And so we ended up helping in a big way in the '08 campaign, and then even more so in 2012. A number of my friends were in the White House. We helped as much as we could, my company, and my network and relationships in his first term, President Obama's first term. And then in 2012, he ran for re-election. I was in Chicago a lot, helping them plan their campaign in terms of the fundraising around the country, but especially California. And then after he won, he asked me to, the short version is asked me to be ambassador to Argentina. It wasn't something I was looking to do. But one of the things I wanted to mention to your viewers and you guys to consider the Foreign Service. People who work in the State Department, really incredible individuals. And I ended up becoming ambassador and working with these career Foreign Service officers who generally were just great to work with. And it was an amazing experience, but a lot of people don't think about that as a career. But I gave the commencement address at UCLA a few years ago, and I encouraged the kids who are graduating with a degree in foreign relations to really consider the Foreign Service.
Yeah. As ambassador, you're not just well, you are one of many, but you aren't just, working in an office. You're the head of that office. So that's a lot of challenges come with that. So, what did you feel was the biggest challenge that you faced as ambassador?
So great question. It's funny when you go through the ambassadorial training, they only have this short, limited time of a few weeks, actually. I ended up spending a lot more time because there was a whole group of us who were kind of caught in the middle of a big fight in the Senate about judges mostly. But although we weren't up to be judges, that actually prevented all these other confirmations. And I was part of that group. And so I ended up living in DC for about a year, more or less, going back and forth, but mostly there, doing as many meetings as possible. Because my thinking was, look, when you're ambassador, you can get anybody to usually give you a call back. You can get a call back, you get an email respond. But like anything, if you have a personal relationship, that person's going to take it more seriously. And so whatever you're asking may move up to the top of the list if you have a personal relationship. And so I decided to spend a lot of time cultivating those relationships because I had this extra year, basically. And so by the time I got to Argentina, it was really good because I spent all this time with people, not just at State Department, but at Defense Department and Department of Agriculture and Commerce and FBI and Homeland Security and CIA. All of these agencies and departments are represented at the embassy. Again, not something I knew ahead of time. Most Americans don't go to an embassy unless you lose your passport or something. But that was what was fascinating. It's basically a mini US government that's housed in the embassy. And some are bigger, some are smaller, depending on the country. The most challenging, uh, there was a lot to do with a limited amount of time. And so the first year was very challenging because so much of what you're trying to get done depends on who that president or that prime minister is in that country at that moment. And so it was pretty antagonistic. They had a president, Christina Kirchner, who was on her way out. She was term limited, but I was there for 1 year that we overlapped. And she would hold press conferences against the US, against me personally, against the embassy. And that was pretty tough. And so what I told the embassy is let's focus on positive things for the first year. Then they had a big election, and maybe the next president will be more conducive to working with us, much more collaborative, which ended up being true. But I said the first year, let's just focus on science, technology, renewable energy, and educational exchanges. Pretty popular things, I thought. So even if the president, wanted to attack us, it'd be a lot harder. And so we built up a lot of goodwill with the Argentine public, I think, who were following these things and said, oh, well, they're not so bad. And we don't dislike the US. I know our president does, but we built up goodwill that I think in that second year, once we had a true partner, somebody who wanted to do things together, then we could focus on security. And a lot of the jobs around security, border control, counter narcotics, votes around climate change at the UN, the IAEA, which is the Atomic Energy Commission, like things that were much bigger in scope. Once you have a partner, once you have a president or a government in the host country that wants to work with you, there's a lot you can do. So we did a lot in that second year. But the first year was kind of building goodwill and building a foundation that then we could become successful in the future.
Yeah. Um, so I also want to get into the midterms because I know that you're involved in that as well. There are the House, the Senate, the executive branch, the judicial branch are all in the Republicans' hands at this moment. That's poses a challenge in for the Democrats in passing laws right now. But it also poses issues to the Republicans because generally the incumbent doesn't win the midterms.
Yeah.
So what would you say? You're advising the Democratic Party. What do you tell them to focus on to try to win the midterms and get power back in Democrats' hands to try to pass some more, Democrat laws?
Yeah. Another good question. I watched your great interview with Ted Lieu, Congressman
Hmm.
Ted Lieu, by the way. And so you'll hear a lot of the Democratic candidates talk about affordability, which, you know, a lot of candidates will basically tap into what people are already feeling. And for sure around the country, but I mean, the most obvious thing is gas prices. And, because people see it every day, they see it going up or coming down, or they see it remaining high. But all the other things, especially when it comes to rent and healthcare. So what the Republicans did last year in passing this law, which was to gut a lot of the support around healthcare. The big time bomb on that is next year. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to really make the pain uh, before the midterm elections, so they pushed it off. That said, you already see these private healthcare companies jacking up premiums on healthcare, and so all of a sudden people are paying double. Some are paying triple what they were before this Republican passed bill that Trump pushed. And so I think you talk to most people, and most likely the Democrats will win back the House. I think the Senate absolutely is possible. Usually, as you said, Ty, the referendum is on the president in power in the midterm election. People think, oh, because they don't really follow politics that much, but do I like what's going on or don't like what's going on? Do I like the president? Do I not like the president? And his approval rating on every poll is in the 30s, in the low mid 30s. And so, it looks like you still have to win. You still have to campaign. You don't know what the economy is going to be like. Most people vote on sort of we call pocketbook issues, but there's there's for sure a sentiment in the U.S. that's pretty negative right now. That does not bode well for the Republicans. They've tried to do everything they could on gerrymandering and try to protect as many Republican seats as possible. So that's made it harder. But that said, I don't like to predict things, but people are unhappy, and that's usually bad for the party in power. And Trump's just a weird political figure. There's people in that people vote that normally don't vote when he's on the ballot. He's been on the ballot in 16 and in 20 and in 24. But on those midterm elections, not as many of his supporters come out that normally don't vote. And so that should help the Democrats. But at the end of the day, until the election happens, you don't really know. They have so much money they've raised, and the Supreme Court has helped them in many ways in this election and future elections, whether it's redistricting or allowing the coordination of money or allowing unlimited money. And so that helps them for sure. I don't think enough, but people have to volunteer. They obviously have to vote. Give money if they can. Talk to other people. So that's what I love what you guys are doing, which is communicating to younger voters who, even if they can't vote yet, they can volunteer, like I did before I was able to vote, like you've done. Volunteer, work on campaigns. And that's an awesome experience. It's really fun. It's interesting. And you build a network of people who you usually you stay connected with afterward. So I strongly recommend you guys and your listeners, viewers, to volunteer on campaigns.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know Ty mentioned before that the current president's party usually loses some seats after these midterms. I know you said you don't like to predict things, but what changes do you think we could see on issues after the midterms based on what you think is going to happen?
So if you have control of Congress, it depends if you have both the House and the Senate or if you just have one. If you just have one, it's a lot of compromise or a lot of blocking, playing defense, right? But if you have both, then you could actually pass legislation. And look at there's some moderate Republicans who want to do things that are common sense. But right now, when they're in the majority and with Trump in office, they kind of have a gun to their head and don't allow Republicans, even if they want to vote with Democratic proposals, they can't. I think once you have a Democratic majority, there's going to be some bipartisan stuff. You saw that under Biden, which so many people forget. There were like the big pieces of legislation that became law. Almost all of them were bipartisan, in that there were 5 Republicans or 10 Republicans or 20 Republicans who would vote for it. And so I potentially see that happening. Again, Trump is such a wild card. It's so hard to know. He's not focused on legislation. He doesn't really care about policy. That's obvious. He much prefers to talk about the ballroom or the plane he was given as a gift or the reflecting pool. Like that's the stuff, or his meme coin, that's the stuff that animates him. That's what he likes. The bill on housing that got passed, which millions of people will benefit from. He called it a yawner. He's just not interested in it. He doesn't care. And the question is, like, if Democrats have both the House and the Senate, Because he doesn't care that much about policy. Will he pass it? Will he veto it? You don't really know. He cares about power. He cares about making money for his family. Other than that, it's really hard to know what he would support or what he would veto. Uh, I, I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. But so that's on domestic policy. Jack, to answer your question, on foreign policy, Congress has very little influence. The president can do mostly what he wants. Today, I just heard this morning, the White House has gone back to Congress to get another 60 days, saying that we have a new war with Iran. So they've played games with Congress about the war with Iran to try to avoid a vote to get authorization to go to war. So, and that's, again, going back to the Supreme Court, has empowered the executive branch, the presidency, so much that Congress has lost more and more influence over the years. Partly they've given it up, and partly has been the Supreme Court. So that said, foreign affairs is still mostly the president, even more so. But Congress will have a lot of say on domestic policy. They can block stuff, they can propose stuff, and we just don't know if Trump will agree to it or not at this point.
Yeah. I mean, you said that President Trump is not, that interested in policy and bills and creating new law. But he still in some small way does. But if the Democrats get back one chamber of the House or of either it's the Senate or
Yeah.
the, is it just going to be playing defense? Are there going to be no, returns from or on that in terms of, new bills passed that affordability or really just new democratic policy into law because it's just playing defense on the president and the Supreme Court and the other chamber of Congress?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends if Democrats get one or both. One is going to be much more just defensive, right? Is just refusing to go along with the most crazy, the most extreme stuff. But I just mentioned this housing bill. What was so shocking was it was super bipartisan, like because of the pain that most Americans are feeling on the price of housing, whether that's rent or purchase. I mean, people a little bit older than you that are looking to buy their first home just sort of like, there's no way. Like I'm not even close to, and maybe never will be able to buy a home, right? And so that pain by the American people, that translated to a huge bipartisan vote that became law, like, but not because Trump signed it, because he decided not to sign it. And so, like, you just don't know. And with Trump, you just don't, really have no idea on any given day what, his mood is going to be or what he's going to do. If Democrats have both, I think there is a chance of him just not caring about policy, and that there'll be enough Republicans where you can get some bipartisan stuff done, like this housing bill, and like 5, 6 big things that Biden got done on a bipartisan level. But the country is so tribal these days. Like, everybody's in their camps. It is very hard to find stuff to compromise on. But as we just saw, it's not impossible. And I think if Democrats control, they're much more likely to try to get bills passed, at least in Congress. He can veto them or not, but they're going to want to show that, hey, you guys elected us, we're going to try to get stuff done. Even if this guy knows it, like, we at least did our part of getting a bill voted out of Congress. So I think it's going to be very sort of moderate stuff, very bipartisan stuff, because they're going to want to show voters, hey, you elected me, we got this bill done. Put your anger at the guy in the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have one more question on the topic, and then we can move on. I know we've talked a lot about if Democrats get both chambers. My question is, if Republicans hold both chambers, what do you think that will look like for Trump's second half of his term?
It's really another good question. Not enough people are asking that question, by the way, Jack. I don't hear many journalists asking that question. Um, I haven't given a ton of thought to it because I don't like to think about it because I think it gets very dark. I think it becomes much more about how do we reduce democracy in the United States? How do we make it harder and harder for people to vote? How do we make it harder for people to run for office? How do we make it harder for young people and minorities to be involved? Um, I think that's the agenda. Plus, how do we enrich ourselves to the maximum extent possible? Um, I think it's going after perceived enemies in a way that we still haven't. I mean, it's unprecedented now, but I think it gets worse. Of people who ran against us. How do we indict them? How do we, you know, use the entire force of the Department of Justice against our political enemies? How do we force people to support us, even if it is uh, grifting, even if it is fraud, even if it is theft of the U.S. Treasury? How do we instill more judges for lifetime appointments that will go along with anything we want? Yeah, I think it gets very dark very quick. Um, so I haven't given that a lot of thought because I like to be optimistic. But I think it's a very not just negative agenda, but very scary and very risky to the United States. Like, so when I was ambassador, in Argentina, when Trump first won, and the Argentines knew I was a Democrat, and but I was when in this job I was nonpartisan, obviously, as all ambassadors were. They said, "Oh, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Like you guys, the United States, you have strong institutions. You're going to be fine." And they were somewhat right, but those institutions wobbled. I mean, in that first term, especially you see January 6th, like the institutions wobbled, okay, whether that was the judiciary, which he attacks nonstop every day, whether it was the press, which they attack the Republicans and Trump especially every day, whether it was the intelligence agencies, which tonight he's going to go on TV and claim a bunch of things that are not true. He's going to lie about a bunch of stuff. He's going to make connections that are not true. Um, and he's going to attack the intelligence agencies. Those are institutions that have helped our country for now 250 years be the greatest country on earth. And so going after the institutions is, I think, there would be their big agenda, this White House. And not all the Republicans in Congress by any means, but enough that are enablers to really do long-term damage that you question, can you recover? At some point, like what you can recover from and what you can't recover from becomes a question. So yeah, we'll see. That's why this election is so important, to be able to have some break on the craziness, some breaks on the extreme, and to be able to protect those institutions. And a lot of people have left. A lot of people have, been fired. Uh, Tons of people have been fired that are just institutional people. They're not partisan. They're not Democrats. They're not independent. They're just institutional people because they want to put their people in, and that really weakens the institutions over time.
Yeah.
But and I have a little bit more time, guys, before my iPad goes down here, but we have a little bit.
Yeah, we can wrap it up.
Sure. So, my question would just be, I'm so pro America and everything in my, life, and I believe for 250 years we've had enough, and we've had our share of issues, and we've been able to, get through them and continue, and it's because of our ideals and our, like you said, it's our institutions and our ideals and the character of our people, and you can go to the dark place for sure, especially when talking about politics. But there has to be something that gives you hope about America, about the fact that we can continue for another 250 years, continue our ideals, be beacon of democracy in the world. So to you, what gives you hope about the next generation and the next 250 years of American Republic?
I love it the way you frame that, Ty. We are the greatest country on earth in spite of our problems, our difficulties, our challenges, our failures. And, when I disagree with not only Trump, but a lot of the Republicans, not all, is let's just be honest about our history. And we could also agree with your sentiment that, yeah, we're the greatest country. Doesn't mean we do everything the best. A lot of countries do stuff better than us, whether that's on healthcare or guns or affordability. But having represented the U.S. overseas, and I've talked to so many other, former ambassadors, like it is really the greatest honor to represent the United States, not a political party, but the United States. And even though we're criticized in so many places around the world, um, this is still the country that most people want to be in. And that gives me hope. That gives me pride in our country, the brilliance of the founding fathers. We could say they were flawed for sure. Many of them owned slaves. They were very flawed. Women didn't have the right to vote. But were they brilliant in the way they conceived this country to allow us to evolve year after year, decade, and century after century? Absolutely. Like that's the brilliance of it, of the structure of the country. Where that's why I go back to the institutions, how important those things are, because if we can keep those, then we could survive ups and downs. And you're either on the left or you're on the right. You don't like the other, political party. That's fine. But we need to always move forward as a country. And when you travel around the world, you come back to the U.S. and you want to many times like kiss the ground, and you feel like you've won the lottery because of the immense challenges around the world in other countries, and whether it's poverty or whether it's women's rights or girls being allowed to go to school or whatever it is. You feel like, wow, we have such an amazing opportunity to make it even better. But damn, it's good now. But with your generation, you guys, you and Jack, and your friends, your network, you guys getting involved is key, because I think most people do not connect politics to their daily life. You can ask them, do you like clean water? That's politics. Do you like the clean air? That's politics. Do you like when you eat? You don't have to think, oh my God, is it healthy? Because it should be, because the FD, because you have, or, government organizations and agencies that are looking after your food and your water and your air. And should we have a minimum wage? Yeah, that's politics, right? So all of it is potholes is politics, right? And so local politics, national politics, why it matters. Ask people what they like. Do they like parks? That's politics. Like, are you going to have more parks or less parks or no parks? Like, whatever it is, but almost no one, very few people, especially your age. That's why I agreed to do this, and I admire you guys. Is you connect your lives to politics and government, okay? And campaigns is that bridge, right? Campaigns changes those in power to be able to make sure you're trying to get as much as you can, but you always realize you got to compromise, right? And so I think that's the beauty of our structure. That what gives me hope, because we're blessed with an amazing structure and foundation and framework, and now we all have to go make the most of it. But I travel a lot, and it always gives me such pleasure to come back home, and optimism and hope that we'll get through what many of us think are really tough times right now, and build for the future.
Yeah, Mr. Mamet, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think I totally agree. It's our generation's job to protect our ideals, and the gift that our founders gave us. So thank you so much for joining us. Um, Thank you. Have a good day.
Wait, I got a question now before
After,
I go.
sure.
All right, to both of you. All right, I'm coming to you first, Jack. My question for the both of you guys is like, how did you get involved in this? Because this is unique. How did you get to appreciate? Do you think of it more as politics or more as government or both? And how did you get involved?
Me personally, I mean, to answer your quick question, I would consider it more, I mean, politics is what I would say what I like to look into, but I really got involved when the 2024 election happened. And I, saw both candidates, learned about both candidates and started to like sort of develop my own opinions. And also having Ty as my friend, I mean, he's gonna say after he's always been into politics. So having him to talk to, he's definitely taught me a lot. And then he wanted to start a podcast, and then I was like, well, why don't we do it together? So then we started the podcast.
It's
Yeah.
great. I love it. All right, Ty, you close us out here, brother.
Since probably first grade, I read My Senator and Me by Ted Kennedy. Um,
Mm,
and most kids would have walked past that book, but I was fascinated by our nation and our government and the structure of our government and the fact that I could go to school and have opinions, and in so many places that's not what people it's not a privilege people have, and we take it for granted. So whether it's government or politics or just the love I have for the greatest country in the world, it's my life, and it's so like Jack said, I went to him and said, let's make a podcast because we're the generation inheriting the decisions of today's leaders. So our goal is just to educate our generation so they know how to carry forward the ideals of our nation and improve our democracy and carry forward our democracy.
it's great, and I really appreciate both your answers, and that's what inspires me. Your guys' answers. If I recommend a fun, I mean, fascinating book that many of us in my generation read, but I think it still holds up today. It's called "What It Takes," and it's about the presidential campaign in 1988, and this guy Richard Ben Kramer. It's kind of like a Bible of campaigns, and spent like months and months with every candidate and lived with them, basically candidates running for president. And it was in Iowa. Iowa was the first state had a caucus, and my former boss, Congressman Gephardt, that was the first time he ran for president. There's like chapter about him, but all these other candidates as well. Fascinating book called What It Takes. It's really interesting. It kind of gets to the heart of who are these people who think they should be president or they can be president, and the insanity of it all in terms of the campaigns and politics and going to all the state fairs and everything else. It's a really interesting. I think you guys may like it. But thank you guys for doing this. Thanks for having me, and I want to stay in touch. Anything I can do to help you guys, but keep doing what you're doing. It's very impressive.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining.
Okay, bye guys.
Thank you. Hope you all enjoyed this episode of Tomorrow's Voters.
Make sure to like, subscribe, and share for more interviews like this.
Thank you for watching.